Hello and welcome to Lamplighter. Today is September 25. Today in our daily Bible reading, some fascinating things begin to happen as the people of God move back to their homeland and they begin to focus on rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem. Now, the temple in Jerusalem, you would think, would be their number one priority, and it is something that the enemies of the people of God certainly don't want to see happen because they know that the strength of God's people comes when they have the temple in place, when they have the wall around the city back in place. So the enemies are going to do everything in their power to discourage the rebuilding of the temple. But as we pick up the reading today, we notice that the people are not really making the rebuilding of the temple, surprisingly enough, their number one priority. They seem to be so excited about being back home, so to speak, that they're putting all of their focus on rebuilding their own homes, on settling their own properties, on planting their crops, that they kind of neglect the importance of rebuilding the temple of the Lord when it should have been a number one priority for them. So one of the reasons the work on the temple stops is that they've focused on their own personal needs. And another reason is because their enemies become very active, making accusations against them and getting the officials of the Persian Empire to get them to stop building the temple. So when we pick up the reading today, we're going to see first an accusation that is leveled against the people who are trying to rebuild the temple, and they're going to have their work on the temple stopped. Rehum, the commanding officer, and Shimshai, the secretary, wrote a letter against Jerusalem to Artaxerxes, the king. And we have the script, we have the transcript, you might say, of their letter right here in the scriptures. Here's what their letter says to the king. The king should know that the Jews who came up to us from you have gone to Jerusalem and are rebuilding that rebellious and wicked city. They are restoring the walls and repairing the foundations. Furthermore, the king should know that if this city is built and its walls are restored, no more taxes, tribute, or duty will be paid, and the royal revenues will suffer. Now, since we are under obligation to the palace, it is not proper for us to see the king dishonored. We are sending their message to inform the king so that a search may be made in the archives of your predecessors. In these records, you'll find that this city is a rebellious city, troublesome to kings and provinces, a place of rebellion from ancient times. That is why this city was destroyed. We inform the king that if this city is built and its walls are restored, you will be left with nothing in Trans-Euphrates. So it's a threatening letter saying if this is allowed to happen, we're going to lose all of our control. We're going to lose all of our income. We can't allow this to happen. And so the king writes back with this reply. The letter you sent us has been read and translated in my presence. I issued an order and a search was made, and it was found that this city has a long history of revolt against kings and has been a place of rebellion and sedition. Jerusalem has had powerful kings ruling over the whole of Trans-Euphrates, and taxes, tribute, and duty were paid to them. Now issue an order to these men to stop work so that this city will not be rebuilt until I so order. Be careful not to neglect this matter. Why let this threat grow to the detriment of the royal interests? And so the work on the temple is halted, just as the enemies of the people of God had hoped. But then there's sort of a shakeup in the Persian government, and immediately when Darius becomes the king, things start to change, and he is going to take a different approach toward the rebuilding of the city. Now remember, we've already discussed that many of the Persian leaders think it is in their best interest to let the people of God have their own identity because a happy people is not likely to rebel against them. So we read about the temple being restarted, and Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the prophet, a descendant of Iddo, prophesied to the Jews in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel who was over them. Then Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, set to work to rebuild the house of God in Jerusalem, and the prophets of God were with them, helping them. I find that fascinating. The prophets are not only prophesying, but they're helping the people rebuild the temple. Well, of course, the enemies of the people of God are not going to put up with that. They're going to try the very same tactic that was successful for them earlier. And so they start to question the authority of those who have restarted the work. But we read this statement, "But the eye of God was watching over the elders of the Jews, and they were not stopped until a report could go to Darius and his written reply to be received." So in other words, they can keep building. They can't be stopped until time passes, allowing a letter to get to the king and a reply to come back. So at least while they're in this interim period, the work on the temple is going to continue. So a letter is written to King Darius. "The king should know that we went to the district of Judah, to the temple of the great God. The people are building it with large stones and placing the timbers in the walls. The work is being carried on with diligence and is making rapid progress under their direction. We questioned the elders and asked them, 'Who authorized you to rebuild the temple and restore this structure?' We also asked them their names so that we could write down the names of their leaders for your information. And this is the answer they gave us." I love this strong answer from the people of God. They said, "We are the servants of God, of heaven and earth, and we are rebuilding the temple that was built many years ago, one that a great king of Israel built and finished. But because our fathers angered the God of heaven, he handed them over to Nebuchadnezzar, the Chaldean, king of Babylon, who destroyed this temple and deported the people to Babylon. However, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Babylon, King Cyrus issued a decree to rebuild the house of God. He even removed from the temple of Babylon the gold and silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem and brought to the temple in Babylon. And from that day to the present, it has been under construction, but it is not yet finished." So we're doing exactly what we have a right to do, is basically what their response is. And so they ask for the king's permission to continue in this project. So the king is going to send his reply, and the king is going to be in favor. He is going to send a memo of the decree from Cyrus, and his memo is basically going to say, "You're right, the temple can be rebuilt. And not only that, we're going to return the articles that Nebuchadnezzar took from the original temple. We're going to return them to you so you can place them in the temple again." And so then we have a decree that's made by Darius. "Now then, Tatnai, governor of Trans-Euphrates, and Shethar-Bozenai, and you, their fellow officials of that province, stay away from there." I love that. The king tells them to leave the people of God alone. "Do not interfere with the work on this temple of God. Let the governor of the Jews and the Jewish elders rebuild this house of God on its site. Moreover, I hereby decree that you are to do for these elders of the Jews in the construction of the house of God. There are some things that I want you to do, not just leave them alone. You've got some jobs to do." He says the expenses of these men are to be fully paid out of the royal treasury from the revenues of Trans-Euphrates so that the work will not stop. As a matter of fact, he says whatever is needed must be given them daily without fail so that they may offer sacrifices pleasing to the God of heaven and pray for the well-being of the king and his sons. Furthermore, I decree that if anyone changes this edict, a beam is to be pulled from his house, and he is to be lifted up and impaled on it. Here is the king defending the people of God and telling their enemies, leave them alone. And better yet, give them everything they need. Pay for it out of your royal treasury. And so all of a sudden the tables have turned. Isn't it fortunate? Isn't it coincidental for the people of God that now Darius is king? Oh, no, not at all. Remember, this story is not about Darius. This story is not even about the previous king. The story is about God. And once again, guess what? God always wins. And he always wins according to his own time schedule. Isn't it great to be a lamplighter? His word is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. I hope you have a blessed day.